Did you know that 27% of adults in the US have cut off contact with at least one family member? I'm one of them. And what makes my story different is this. I cut off 3 people, my father, my mother, and my sister, all on one Christmas night. It might not sound kind, but once you've heard the whole story, you'll understand. Hello, everyone. My name is Minerva Monroe. I'm 30 years old and currently living in Boston. I'm a software engineer for a major tech corporation based in San Jose. Life these days is pretty peaceful. In the mornings, I wake up next to Ronald, my boyfriend, and we make breakfast together. Then we both head off to work. After a full day, we come home, cook dinner side by side, watch a movie, take a walk, or meet up with friends at a coffee shop. But this peace didn't come without a cost. The price I had to pay was cutting ties with my parents and sister. 7 months ago, I completely severed those blood ties during Christmas. Sounds harsh, but sometimes, to truly find yourself, you must be brave enough to let go of the people you thought would never leave your side. And the story I'm about to share will explain why that was the best decision I've ever made. My story began with a phone call from Derek in December 2024. It was a late evening, about a week before Christmas, and I was working from my small apartment in San Jose when I got a call from Derek, my cousin on my dad's side and the only person I'd ever felt close to in my extended family. The moment I saw his name on my screen, my heart skipped a beat. We hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years, not because of any fight, but because I had been intentionally cutting off contact with my family. I didn't answer the call. After the missed call, Derek left a message that read, "Minerva, Aunt Connie wants you home for Christmas. Everyone's getting together this year." When I saw my mother's name, memories hit me hard. I remembered just how cold she had always been, and the last time I'd been home, 8 years ago, also during Christmas. That was the year I left, determined never to return. After I noticed my photo had disappeared from the shelf and the Christmas tree was decorated with only Jessica's ornaments. I didn't reply to Derek's message, but the question kept echoing in my head. Why is she asking me to come home now? About 30 minutes later, Derek called again. This time, I answered. After a few minutes of catching up, small talk about work, life, and health, I finally asked him why my mom wanted me back. He replied quickly, "Jessica's bringing her husband and their first baby home. The family wants you there too, to complete the picture." The moment I heard that, I let out a bitter laugh. It hit me. I was another piece to make their perfect family portrait look whole. After a pause, Derek gently suggested I return. Not for them, but for myself. He said, "You need closure, Minerva. You've been running for long enough." Then he hung up, leaving me in a silence heavier than anything I'd felt. I set my phone down on the table, but my mind spun with 1,000 tangled thoughts. Derek wasn't wrong. I had been running. But would going back really give me the kind of closure he was talking about? At that moment, I asked myself if I was strong enough to face the people who once made me feel like an outsider in my own home. For 8 years, I had built a life for myself, found my voice, and learned how to love who I was. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized Derek had a point. I couldn't live forever in the shadows of my past. It was time to face them, not as the hurt girl they once silenced, but as the woman I had become. After the call, I told Ronald about Derek's invitation. He listened from beginning to end without interrupting, his eyes focused, full of empathy. When I finished, Ronald stayed quiet for a moment. Then he reached over, took my hand, and said, "I think you should go." And then after a pause, he added softly, "This time, I'm going with you." Hearing that, I felt something inside me begin to ease. Over the past 3 years, he had seen me wake up in the middle of the night from childhood nightmares. He had sat beside me through awkward silences whenever someone asked about my family. Ronald understood this wasn't just a trip home. It was a confrontation I had put off for far too long. The next evening, Ronald suggested we go out and buy some gifts for everyone after work. When he brought it up, I hesitated. "You think we should? They've never," I started to say. He gently cut me off. "This isn't about whether they deserve it. It's about who you are and how you want to show up." His words hit deep. I nodded in quiet agreement. We drove to the mall and spent nearly 2 hours picking out gifts. A bottle of premium whiskey for my dad, a luxury perfume set for my mom, educational toys for Jessica's child, a travel book for Jessica herself, and a few thoughtful items for extended relatives. We had spent over $1,000 by the time we were done, but when I looked at the carefully wrapped gift bags in the trunk of our car, I didn't feel regret. This time, I wasn't returning empty-handed like the girl I once was, and with Ronald by my side, I truly believed I was ready. On Christmas Day, Ronald and I drove our SUV from San Jose to Fresno, bringing along the carefully chosen gifts for everyone. The trip took nearly 5 hours because of traffic, and the entire drive, Ronald kept my nerves in check with light-hearted stories and little jokes that helped ease the tension. As we turned onto the familiar street leading to my old house, the faded home appeared through a light layer of snow, stirring up memories I had long buried. Ronald gently reached for my hand and whispered, "You're going to be okay. I'm right here." Jessica answered the door, still wearing that same smug expression I remembered. When she saw me, she gave a fake smile and said, "Minerva, you finally crawled out of your code cave to visit the family." I ignored the jab, politely congratulated her on becoming a mother, and introduced Ronald. Jessica shook his hand with a cold, distant grip, then stepped aside to let us in, to a house that still smelled of floor polish and gingerbread. Mom walked out of the kitchen, visibly surprised to see me. The moment she saw me standing next to Ronald, she forced a smile and said, "Minerva, you look so different, and this must be—" I cut in before she could finish. "This is Ronald, my boyfriend." Mom nodded stiffly, but I could feel her eyes scanning Ronald from head to toe. I wasn't looking for approval. I wasn't here for compliments. I was here to close a chapter. We stepped into the living room. Nothing had changed in 8 years. The TV stand was still lined with framed photos of Jessica, childhood pictures, her college graduation, her wedding, but not a single photo of me. Ronald glanced around and instantly understood everything I had told him. When I asked about where we'd be staying, Mom hesitated and said, "Jessica's using your old room as a nursery for baby Michael. You and Ronald can sleep on the sofa." Before I could react, Ronald replied with calm politeness, "We'll just book a hotel nearby. It's no problem at all." Around 6 o'clock in the evening, the party began. About 20 relatives had gathered at the house, including my cousin Derek. He showed up around 5, and we had about 10 minutes to catch up before things got busy. When I saw Derek walk in, I felt a wave of relief. He gave me a firm pat on the shoulder and whispered, "Glad you decided to come back." He greeted Ronald warmly, too. I could tell he liked him immediately. Derek had an ease about him, honest, relaxed. None of the fake energy I felt from most others. While we chatted, Ronald subtly observed the room. He noticed how people gave me short, polite greetings before quickly moving on, while showering Jessica with endless praise and attention. When it was time to sit down for dinner, we were assigned our seats. I was placed at the far end of the table, my back to the fireplace, with Ronald next to me. Jessica and Marcus were seated closest to my parents, with their baby Michael in a high chair. As everyone raised their glasses, my mother offered a toast, congratulating Jessica on her career success and Marcus on his latest business project. She didn't say a single word about me. Under the table, Ronald gently touched my hand, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone. I sat in silence, not out of weakness, but because I no longer needed their approval. Partway through dinner, Aunt Marcia, my dad's younger sister, made a snide remark about my job. With a smirk, she said, "Still sitting in front of a computer all day, Minerva? Doing those things regular folks can't understand?" I calmly replied that I worked with intelligent systems and helped companies protect sensitive customer data. Sensing the condescension, Ronald chimed in softly, "Minerva's incredibly talented. She just wrapped a major project for a national bank." Aunt Marcia gave a dismissive nod, then turned to ask Jessica something, as if what Ronald said didn't matter. But her comment had already done its job, a subtle reminder that I didn't belong here. Soon after, Jessica began bragging about Marcus's startup. She spoke proudly about a recent pitch they gave for a new health app, one they hoped would raise $500,000 in seed funding. Intrigued, I asked, "So is the app live yet?" Marcus looked caught off guard. He stumbled through an answer, blaming missed deadlines on developers who didn't understand business needs. As he spoke, I could immediately see through the fluff. Marcus was repackaging a recycled model with no solid tech team and no grasp of the basics, but I said nothing. Ronald glanced at me, his eyes saying what words didn't have to. He knew I could dismantle Marcus's entire pitch with a few calm sentences, but he also understood why I chose silence. Because in my parents' house, every word from Jessica and Marcus was taken as gospel. My mom and dad nodded in admiration, praising Marcus's vision like it was revolutionary. When dessert was served, Uncle Ron, my mom's younger brother, turned to me and asked about my work. With a calm tone, he said, "So, Minerva, what do you do out in California?" I told him I was the lead engineer at a cybersecurity firm and had just wrapped up a significant project for a regional banking system in the Pacific Northwest. But Marcus jumped in before I could go into any detail, steering the conversation back to himself. He started bragging about an upcoming pitch and the possibility of securing $300,000 in seed funding. With excitement in his voice, Marcus declared, "This is a huge opportunity for the whole family. Once the app takes off, we can all benefit." Hearing that, my mother beamed and praised Jessica and Marcus, calling them amazing and saying, "Business runs in our blood." My father nodded in agreement, adding, "That's right. The Monroe family's always had a mind for business." As they praised Jessica and Marcus, Ronald glanced over at me with a look of quiet empathy. He had just heard me talk about a multi-million-dollar project I led, but no one asked a single follow-up question. Instead, all their attention went to Marcus's half-formed ideas and promises. Watching that unfold, I realized something. I had just completed a high-level, successful project worth millions, and not everyone at that table seemed to care. And strangely enough, I was okay with that. Because in that moment, I finally understood. I didn't need their approval to feel whole. I didn't need their recognition to know my worth. After dessert, Ronald and I went to the car to bring in our prepared gifts. When we walked back into the living room with large shopping bags, Marcus and my mother looked surprised. With a curious look, my mother asked, "Why did you bring so many gifts?" I smiled and encouraged everyone to open them. Ronald sat beside me, quietly observing each reaction. As the wrapping came off, the room filled with murmurs of amazement and compliments. Aunt Marcia was stunned by the high-end Japanese knife set. My dad lit up when he unwrapped 2 tickets to a symphony concert. My mother, in particular, was pleased with the Italian perfume. She sniffed it and smiled. "This smells wonderful. How did you know I love perfume, Minerva?" Even Jessica looked surprised when she opened the gift for Michael, a set of handcrafted educational wooden toys from Germany worth nearly $200. After everyone had finished opening what I brought, my parents got their carefully wrapped collection of gifts, neatly arranged beneath the Christmas tree. My dad handed Jessica a Rolex watch and said, "This is to celebrate your success at work." Jessica opened the box and gasped, "Oh my God, you guys spent way too much." My mother beamed with pride. "You deserve the very best." Marcus received a tailored Armani suit, and baby Michael had a mountain of presents. Legos, remote control cars, you name it. Even Derek got a vintage bottle of whiskey and a genuine leather wallet. Aunt Marcia unwrapped a designer handbag. Uncle Ron got the latest smartwatch. Even distant cousins received perfumes, books, clothing, and accessories. Ronald sat beside me, keeping his expression neutral, but I could see in his eyes that he finally understood what I had always known. My parents had a list, a precise inventory of gifts for every family member, every friend, every relative. Each box had a name carefully labeled: Jessica, Marcus, Michael, even Derek. But not a single one said Minerva. Ronald and I were invisible in that room, ghosts at a celebration where everyone else belonged. As everyone busied themselves with their new gift, Ronald and I sat quietly, like 2 spectators at a play we were never cast in. But once the last ribbon was torn and the final box opened, an odd silence settled over the room. Everyone held something in their hands, except us. I sat there, hands resting on my knees. No gift, no card, not even a simple sorry. Ronald noticed it too. He gently reached over and held my hand. Sensing the tension, my mom gave a forced smile and said, Maybe Minerva's gift is still in my room. I must have forgotten to bring it out." Before she could say more, Marcus let out a loud laugh and chimed in, "I remember Jessica telling me Minerva cried when she thought Santa forgot her when she was 10. Still the same, huh?" Jessica giggled and added, "Yeah, she cried the whole morning that year." Their laughter echoed through the room. I didn't respond. I just took a slow sip of my now cold coffee. At that moment, I saw things clearly. It wasn't that they had forgotten me. It was that I was never part of the plan to begin with. Ronald felt the shift. He leaned closer and whispered, "It's okay, babe." I didn't get a gift either. But I knew it wasn't about the gifts. It was about being deliberately left out, erased from something that should have always included me. After 30 years, I realized I was still just a shadow in the house I grew up in. And for the first time, I felt calm, not angry, not hurt, just clear, crystal clear about where I stood in this family. Seeing everyone holding their gifts while I had nothing brought back childhood memories like a flood. I couldn't stop them. Growing up, I, Minerva Monroe, believed I was a mistake in my own family. We looked like the perfect household from the outside, but that image was just a polished shell hiding the fractures no one dared to name. I was the youngest, born after Jessica, the volleyball star, straight-A student, and golden child. Her face was printed on family Christmas cards. I, on the other hand, was once cropped out of a holiday photo at 14 because I was standing in the wrong spot. The anger I felt at first slowly numbed into silence. I learned early that pushing back only made things worse. Growing up in the suburbs of Fresno, I always felt like I was living in a play where I didn't get a speaking role. Every spotlight was on Jessica. She'd unwrap glamorous Christmas presents while I got whatever was thrown together last minute. I still remember those mornings. Jessica opening a brand new laptop or a silver necklace, while I unwrapped a hand-me-down sweater from a cousin or a used textbook. My mother called it fair, saying, "Jessica needs these things for her future." But it always felt like a quiet reminder that I wasn't loved unconditionally. At 16, when I began showing signs of mild depression and stopped wanting to go to school, my mom coldly ignored the school counselor's recommendation that I see a therapist. Even the school psychologist noted that I didn't need to be fixed. I just needed to be seen. But my parents refused to acknowledge that there was any issue. They only knew how to love the version of a child they could brag about, not the real one who was quietly falling apart. With my wild curly hair and straight A's, but no trophies or school medals, I never fit the family mold. Jessica would often mock my dreams of becoming a writer. And the most painful part, my parents would laugh along with her. I remember her saying, "Minerva's off writing her little fantasy stories again. She should focus on something real, like volleyball." And my dad would nod and add, "Yeah, a real girl should be confident, not hiding in notebooks." I never pushed back. I stayed quiet and followed every rule, hoping I'd be seen someday. I did the chores without being asked, studied hard, and never caused trouble. But year after year, I remained on the edge of the dinner table, never getting a personalized Christmas card, never hearing a word of praise for my grades. Eventually, I stopped expecting recognition. I learned how to survive without it, turning invisibility into a form of freedom, silence into a source of strength. Everything started to change when I stumbled upon a faded flyer for the school's coding club, pinned to a forgotten hallway corkboard. Mr. Davidson, my math teacher, was the club's advisor. When I nervously asked about joining, he handed me an old laptop and smiled. "Good. That means you won't have to unlearn any bad habits." From that point on, I was hooked. I started with basic code, slowly learning to build simple games. For the first time in my life, I had something that was entirely mine. The world of code made sense. Everything had a reason, a logic, and no one mocked you for learning or making mistakes. In that club, I wasn't Jessica's disappointing little sister. I was just Minerva, the kid who loved to code. While my parents were driving Jessica to volleyball tournaments, I stayed late in the school library, teaching myself Python and JavaScript. Those quiet afternoons became the highlight of my week, sitting in my parents' living room now, watching everyone celebrate Christmas with gifts and laughter. I remembered the first time I felt truly free, typing out those first lines of code. That's when I realized my worth wasn't something they could give me. It was something I had to find for myself. When I was 18, right after graduating from high school, I applied for a full scholarship to Caltech without telling anyone at home. I wrote my essay quietly and submitted my application during afternoons when the rest of the family was busy with Jessica's activities. The day I got the acceptance email, offering a full ride for computer science, including tuition, housing, and a living stipend, I didn't cry or scream. I sat still, calm, confident. This was my way out. I'll never forget when I sat in my room, hands trembling as I read, "Congratulations." I had something entirely mine for the first time, something no one could diminish or take away. That fall, I moved to San Jose with 2 suitcases and $300 in savings from part-time jobs. I carried with me both fear and hope. My family dropped me off at the airport without much fanfare, as if I were going on a short trip, not starting a new life. At Caltech, I majored in cybersecurity, one of the most demanding, overwhelmingly male programs. Initially, I felt lost among students who had grown up with tech-savvy parents and had been coding since they were kids. I didn't have close friends or fun Friday nights like some classmates, but I had a purpose. During the day, I studied relentlessly. At night, I worked shifts as a barista at a small cafe near campus to cover living expenses. At that cafe, I learned how to connect with people, how to smile through demanding customers, and, maybe most importantly, how to ignore the whispers and dismissive looks. Those first few months in California were hard, but I could feel myself changing slowly but surely. I wasn't that quiet girl on the edge of the table in Fresno anymore. I was becoming the woman I had always wanted to be. Every night before bed, I'd look out the dorm window and remind myself, I made the right choice. For the first time, I was living my life, not the one someone else expected of me. I wrote a thesis on simulated cyber attacks. In my final year of college, my advisor, Dr. Rodriguez, nominated me to present it at an international cybersecurity conference in Las Vegas. Standing before hundreds of industry professionals, I delivered my research on identifying emerging security vulnerabilities. For the first time, I felt genuinely competent in a field no one in my family could even begin to understand. A month after the conference, I received an email from CyberGuard Solutions, a major cybersecurity firm in Silicon Valley, requesting an interview. My heart raced as I read it. They'd heard about my work and wanted to meet. The interview lasted 3 hours. I walked them through my original algorithm designed to detect and neutralize security breaches in real time. The room was filled with veteran engineers asking tough questions, but I held my ground and answered with quiet confidence. 3 weeks later, just before graduation, I got the job offer, a yearly starting salary of $130,000. When I saw the number, I didn't jump up or scream. I felt this deep, quiet calm, like every silent effort I'd made had finally meant something. My parents knew nothing about any of it. To them, I was still studying code at some no-name school, while Jessica, the golden child, was starting her career as a pediatrician on an $80,000 salary. They didn't come to my graduation. Jessica and my parents had a family vacation planned with Marcus's family that same weekend. My mom called the night before to apologize. You know, graduations are just symbolic anyway, she said casually. But I didn't feel sad. I hired a local photographer and posed in front of the computer science building in my cap and gown, diploma in hand. Summa cum laude. No one clapped, no one watched. But I knew what I had done. Those pictures weren't for social media or anyone else. They were a quiet promise to myself. I could build my future without their applause. Sitting in my parents' living room now, watching everyone fawn over Jessica and Marcus, I think back to that quiet pride, and I know I've come a long way from the girl who used to sit silently at the edge of the dinner table. Back at the Christmas party, I set my coffee mug down and pulled a polished steel keychain from my coat pocket. Engraved on it was a simple address: 10847 Bay Street, Unit 12A, San Francisco. As people caught sight of the keychain, I said calmly, I just closed on a 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo overlooking the San Francisco Bay. Everyone froze in surprise. Jessica was the first to speak. With a skeptical look, she asked, Where did you get the money for that? Places in San Francisco are insanely expensive. I answered evenly, It's from the bonus I received for leading a cybersecurity project for 3 major fintech companies in California, just under $1 million. The room fell into stunned silence. Derek was the only one who smiled and nodded with genuine pride. After an awkward pause, my mother forced a proud smile. Oh, I didn't realize you were making that kind of money. I'd love to see the new place. I met her gaze and replied coolly, I haven't moved in yet. When I settle in, I plan to host a dinner for friends. At that moment, Aunt Marcia chimed in with her usual tone of moral superiority. Minerva, no matter what, family is what matters most. Money can't replace blood. But Marcus leaned forward before I could say anything, trying to pivot the conversation. With a strange smile, he said, Minerva, I know we've had our differences in the past, but this is the perfect time for you to invest. We're looking for $300,000 to launch phase 1 of our startup. It's a chance for the whole family to win. I looked at him and asked bluntly, Is the app live yet, Marcus? He hesitated. Well, the backend's still missing a few key features, but we've got a solid idea and a strong marketing team. Sensing the tension, Jessica jumped in. trying to smooth things over. Minerva, you should help the family. Marcus needs that support to finish the product. I looked her straight in the eye and said clearly and firmly, absolutely not. The room went dead silent again. I had said no to my family for the first time, loud and clear. Ronald squeezed my hand, standing solidly beside me. Derek gave me a subtle nod, understanding exactly what this moment meant. The rest of the room stared at me as if I had just committed the ultimate betrayal. My mother froze when she heard my response. I repeated my decision. I'm not giving Marcus a single dollar. I'm not investing. I'm not getting involved. I'm not a lifeline for a half-baked idea. My father stood up, visibly angry. That's how you treat your family after everything we've done for you? I let out a small, calm laugh. Not bitter, just honest. Then I asked, exactly what have you done for me? Before he could answer, I continued, still composed. Raising a child is a parent's responsibility, not a lifelong debt I'm expected to repay by funding someone else's dreams. Marcus snapped then, pointing a finger at me. You're just some girl who stares at a screen all day. You don't understand real business like I do. I looked at him, not with anger or disdain, just with the quiet heartbreak of realizing I'd clung to the last shred of hope that maybe this family could change. I replied calmly and steadily, if you understood business, you wouldn't be begging for money from the same screen girl you've always mocked. Jessica dropped her gaze. My mom turned to stare out the window. My dad looked down at the floor. Only Derek stayed still, watching it all unfold with a knowing expression. Feeling the weight of the room, I stood up and said, Ronald and I are leaving. My mother turned back quickly, trying to stop me. Minerva, I'm sorry. It was just a misunderstanding. Please stay. She reached to take my hand, but I gently pulled away and said, Mom, I've been silent for over 20 years. I'm just now learning how to speak. Ronald stood up beside me, ready to go. Derek got up too, adding, I understand Minerva's decision. Maybe it's time this family faced some truth. And for the first time, I'd said everything I needed to say. No pain, no regret, just a strange and undeniable sense of peace. Ronald and I left the house at 8:15 p.m. Marcus didn't say goodbye. Jessica was too busy trying to calm Michael down. My mother stood silently at the door, watching us go without a word. Derek was the only one who stepped outside to see us off. He hugged me and whispered, You did the right thing. We drove back to San Jose in silence. Ronald didn't ask anything. He just rested his hand gently on my leg whenever my phone buzzed. I didn't hesitate to decline every call. Mom, Dad, Jessica. At a gas station outside the city, while Ronald went inside to grab water, I opened my contacts and began blocking every number from my family. One by one, the names disappeared. Mom, Dad, Jessica. Strangely, I didn't feel bitter or angry. I felt like I had finally removed the last chains I didn't even realize I'd been dragging around for so long. When we returned to our apartment in San Jose, I stood on the balcony looking out at the city lights. Ronald made us 2 cups of tea and stood beside me. How do you feel? He asked softly. Relieved, I said honestly. I like keeping a safe distance from people who made me feel like I needed permission just to exist. A text popped up from Derek. Mom's telling everyone you betrayed the family. Brace yourself. I replied, Let them talk. I'm finally just living truthfully. Derek responded with a laughing emoji. I'm proud of you. I stared at those words. Of all the voices that had shaped my childhood, Derek's was the only one that never asked me to shrink or become someone else. Ronald read the message over my shoulder and smiled. Derek gets you. I nodded. He always has, and more importantly, now I get me too. That night, back in our apartment, I fell asleep for the first time in years without a single nightmare about my family. The following week, I returned to work and was appointed lead engineer for a new cybersecurity initiative with a significant investment bank, the most important role I'd ever taken. I threw myself into the job entirely, because in a way, it was the only thing left that gave my life a sense of purpose. That Friday night, I told the entire story to my closest friends, Emma, David, and Michael, who had become my chosen family over the past 3 years. Emma spoke first. Minerva, you stayed quiet for too long. Love with conditions isn't love. David nodded in agreement. Real family never makes you feel like you need permission just to exist. Sitting in our usual bar, I realized that these people, with no blood ties, had never once made me feel small or like I needed to prove my worth to earn a seat at the table. Ronald raised his beer and said, To your freedom. Emma smiled and added, To the family we choose. There, surrounded by genuine kindness, by Ronald and the friends who had stood by me, I felt joy. I felt lucky, because at least I had them in my corner. But I didn't know that the storm with my biological family wasn't quite over. 3 days later, Derek called with the news I had half expected. "Mom's telling people you're either laundering money or investing illegally," he said. "She claims there's no way you could afford a condo in San Francisco alone." I didn't get angry. I just felt tired. "Let her say what she wants," I replied. "I don't care anymore." There was a pause on the line before Derek asked, "Are you really okay with cutting everyone off like this?" I looked out the office window at the skyline of Silicon Valley and replied calmly, "Derek, I cut them off a long time ago. I just never dared to name it until now." Derek exhaled deeply, then said, "You've grown up, Minerva. I get it. I do." After we hung up, I felt peaceful. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain myself or apologize for finally putting myself first. It's been 6 months since that Christmas night, and my life now, it's calmer than it's ever been. Every morning, I wake up without that heavy feeling in my chest. No more anxiety about missed calls or texts from family. Ronald and I make coffee together, talk through our plans for the day, and on weekends, we walk through the neighborhood or meet up with friends, without explaining anything to anyone. Occasionally, I grab coffee with Derek, the only family member I've stayed in touch with. During our most recent catch-up, Derek shook his head and said, "She's still out there telling people you won the lottery or did something shady to afford your condo." I just gave a quiet laugh. She can't accept that I made it on my own. "As for Jessica and Marcus," Derek added, "they crashed and burned with that startup. Marcus had to crawl back to his old job, and Jessica's pulling extra shifts to cover expenses." There was something bitterly ironic in hearing that. Derek gave me a look and said, "Now they know why you said no." "But the most meaningful part of these past 6 months?" Ronald said yes. "I proposed to him 2 months ago at the same coffee shop where we first met. No fireworks, no string quartet, just us, and a quiet promise to build a life based on genuine love, not expectations. And now our wedding is just 2 weeks away. We've planned a small ceremony, just 30 of our closest friends. The only unresolved question? Whether or not to invite my family. At our wedding planning meeting last week, Emma was firm. "You don't need them to feel whole," she said gently but firmly. "This day is about your future, not your past." But when I brought it up to Derek, he was more hesitant. He gently said, "They're still your family. Maybe they'll come around." Ronald left the decision entirely up to me. He said he'd support whatever I chose. But last night, as we lay in bed, he quietly whispered, "Whatever you decide, I want our day to be peaceful." And now I'm torn. Between honoring the boundaries I finally found the strength to set, or giving them one last chance. I keep replaying everything in my head. The cold indifference, the erased childhood, the table where I never really had a seat, the laughter at my expense, the gifts they carefully chose for everyone but me. And yet, there's still that little voice in the back of my mind, the one that sounds like a younger version of me, the girl who once begged for her mom's attention with perfect report cards, the one who waited by the window on birthdays, hoping her dad would come home with a smile or a surprise. That girl still wants closure. But maybe closure doesn't come from giving people another chance to hurt you. Maybe it comes from protecting your peace, choosing your own happiness, and learning to stop needing the love that always came with conditions. Our wedding will be in a botanical garden just outside the city. It's quiet, intimate. The flowers bloom into soft pastels at sunset, and the air smells like new beginnings. It's the kind of place where I can imagine starting our forever, surrounded by friends who chose me without obligation, judgment, or guilt. We'll have no more than 30 guests, all of them people who saw me for who I really am, who loved me not because of my resume or reputation, but because of how I laugh, how I care, how I try, even when it's hard. I imagine walking down the aisle, my dress light and flowing, Ronald's eyes meeting mine at the altar. I imagine Emma wiping tears beside me, David offering a toast, and Michael dancing with reckless joy. I imagine peace. And then I picture what would happen if I invited my family. Jessica showing up late, smirking behind sunglasses. Marcus acting like it's his startup launch. My parents arriving with polite smiles but guarded stares, trying to take credit for everything I've built. I picture them trying to control the narrative, making me small again, turning my wedding into another performance where I'm not allowed to be the main character. And that's when I realized something. I've already made my decision. I just needed to say it aloud. I'm not inviting them. This wedding isn't about olive branches or second chances. It's about honoring the girl who finally walked away. It's about loving the woman she became. And it's about standing beside a man who never made me feel like I had to earn his respect. Ronald kissed my forehead this morning as we went over the final details. "You look lighter," he said with a smile. "I am," I told him. We picked up our rings today. Simple, timeless. Mine is rose gold with a thin row of tiny diamonds. His is platinum, brushed with a smooth, matte finish. When I slipped it onto his finger in the store, he whispered, "I've waited my whole life for someone who looks at me the way you do." I smiled and whispered back, "So have I." Later that evening, we sat on our balcony drinking tea, watching the sky fade from gold to lavender. Ronald reached for my hand and said, "Whatever they're saying, whatever rumors are spreading, you know the truth, and that's enough." I nodded. It is enough. I've spent too many years letting other people define my worth, measure my success, decide whether I belonged. Not anymore. In 2 weeks, I'll walk down the aisle, not just toward Ronald, but toward a life I built on my own terms. And I hope, wherever you are, whether you've walked away from people who hurt you, or you're still gathering the courage to take that first step, you know this. You are not too much. You are not too sensitive. You are not a disappointment. You are allowed to leave the table when love is no longer being served. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or if you've found the strength to stand up for yourself, I'd love to hear your story too. Please share it below. And if this helped you feel even a little less alone, I hope you'll like, subscribe, and pass it on to someone else who might need to hear these words. Because sometimes the bravest thing we can do is choose peace over permission. Love, Minerva.